I recognize actually quite a few faces from last year, which was super awesome. Glad you liked the panel enough to come back. It's changed a little bit, and so if you were here last year, I'm going to get into a few clarifications and a few changes that I've made after rewatching my panel from last year. So it might be a little bit different, but hopefully it's better this time. Fingers crossed. I made the panel cute, or not the panel, but the slides are kind of cute, I hope. So that's a fun thing to look at. And yeah, let's see. You can come on in. I don't bite, usually.
We promise.
Yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time.
We got plenty of seats in the front.
Right.
I'm wearing a mask, so don't worry. I won't sneeze on you. Probably. Also, for people in the back, is the audio okay? I'm pretty soft-spoken. Okay, great. Great, that's fantastic. I'm so glad they have mics because last year my mic was not good, and I cannot project. That is a weakness of mine. And so that was a bit rough, so I'm glad that the mic is clear for people in the back. How are we doing on recording? Good? Fantastic. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start. Thank you all for coming. Once again, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So this is the Making a Fursona panel. I'm your panelist, Tabby. Let's get into it. So about me. So who am I? I'm Tabby. I am an artist in the fandom. I'm 22 years old. I'm a Taurus, if you were curious. What do I typically do? I do a lot of art. I also help run a server for Pacific Northwest Furries. If you want to join, I'm going to do a quick self-promo. So if you want to, the QR code for the Pacific Northwest Furries Discord is over there. And the QR code for my Twitter is over there. So if you want to join either of those or follow me, link, you can. And if you want me to pull up the slide after the panel, I can absolutely do that. I'd be happy to. It's a really nice server. And so the reason why I did this panel last year and I decided to do this panel is because frequently in that server, people would ask me about ideas for their persona or how to kind of connect with their persona more because I guess I'm really good at that or something. And so I was like, well, I give advice on this all the time, so I might as well do a panel on it. And so here I am. So let's give a clarification. So for those of you that attended the panel last year or read the panel description, I'm not going to be using fursuiter examples this year. And this panel is going to be more personally focused and focused more on developing a persona than design focused. And so I want to stress, this is not a character design panel. I'm sorry if you came expecting that. Golden Druid usually hosts one. I think they did this year. And so I can give advice on markings to pick, but beyond like sentimentality or maybe like significance of markings, I'm not really the one to come to about like color choice or like color theory or anything like that. So if you're looking for like a really beautiful persona, I believe in you, you can do it. All right, and let's see. Those are my clarifications. Sorry if the panel description was misleading. I couldn't edit it. I'm not very tech savvy. So let's get into the panel. So what's a persona? I would also like to know, because if you ask anyone in the fandom, they'll probably give you a different answer. Like alone, like if I walked up to 5 people at this con alone, you could probably get 5 drastically different answers. And so I can give you some common definitions, and so generally, a persona can be a representation of you. And so, for example, like this cool rainbow dog with like massive pecs is how I represent myself, and this is how I see myself. Or it could be like an ideal version of you. And so, you know, it could be like this purple gecko is like really successful and charismatic. I want to be more like that. And so, it could be either who you see yourself as, or who you want to be. Or, you know, I've seen some people have their persona be more of a mascot, and so it's more of a brand, where it's like, okay, I'm not really a furry, but you know, I draw furry art, and you know, this is my character that I put in all my merch, and so it's kind of become a persona. And so, generally, a persona is used as a representation of who you are, or what you want to show to others. And so, the question is, why have a persona? And so if you came to this panel, I'm going to make the safe assumption that you are interested in making a persona, or you're interested in reimagining the one you have now, or maybe you're just a big Tabby supporter, I don't know. Or maybe you're my partner this year. Hey. And so let's just assume maybe that you randomly showed up at this panel and I have to convince you why you should make a persona. So maybe you're a parent or a supporter of someone at this time who's a furry, but maybe you're not a persona yourself. So why is having a persona, in my opinion, important? So personas are deeply personal, or, well, they can be deeply personal for some people, and they can be very casual for others. And so personas are sort of, in a way, a signal to other people about what you are, or who you want to represent. And so while I did mention mascots in the last slide, I do think that personas, in a way, are kind of mascots for all of us. And so they kind of give off, like, I suppose a vibe that you want other people to get from you. That's not a very professional term, but you get what I mean. And so I think one of the things that is really amazing about the fandom is that people who want to honor their identities through their persona can, or if people want to like shed their identities and become a completely different person through their persona, they're absolutely able to do that. And so, for example, someone who is transgender may be super liberated by having their persona be able to be, the gender they identify as, and somebody who's transgender, for example, I am, may want their persona to be trans, and some people may want their persona to be cis in a way that's like more affirming. And so, personas give people that choice. You don't have to follow any guidelines when you make a persona, which I think is really amazing. And you can kind of take on this like new identity or kind of show off your identity, which I think is really incredible. And I think personas give people that chance in a way that they don't really have outside of the fandom. Multiple personas are a thing, and so I actually have multiple personas. I'll get into that later. And so why do that? So I think speaking of the fandom and outside the fandom, I think we all have different ways of showing up in the world, different parts of our personalities, and I think multiple personas can honor that. Another thing is like maybe you just like two animals and you want to have a persona of each animal, or you like Pokemon, you want to have a Pokesona. I think it's absolutely awesome to have multiple personas because very rarely can you fit all of you into one little animal. That's okay. Anyway, so and another thing to think about is fursuit compatibility, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the panel. But sometimes people might have multiple personas because one is not fursuit compatible, but one is. And so thinking about design, which is something we'll get into later, is another reason why somebody could have multiple personas. Also, having a persona is really fun. You can get art. You can get art with your friends, you can write stories about them. It's just a good time. I mean, I remember after Zootopia came out, a lot of like quote unquote normies were making their like Zootopia sonas, which is a persona, by the way. Let's just call it what it is. It's a persona. I see persona, I say persona. And I think actually quite a number of people got into the fandom through Zootopia. And so even people who are outside the fandom, are kind of recognizing that it's really cool to have like a little creature that represents you. And so I think it's really great, outside of like, logistical or like deep identity stuff. And so I'm going to use my persona as an example of how someone's personal journey could go into developing a persona. And so I'm going to share some embarrassing art. So this is my persona when I was 13. This is my art when I was 13. It's not super great. And there, you can't even see the background. I didn't know how to like do any of that. And so this is age 15 because I wanted to be super cool and be like, I'm 15, but now I was 13. And so originally when I got into the fandom, it was through Warrior Cats, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. I love those books. And so I started with a cat persona. This is the Anthro version of them. Oh man, that art, wow. And so I, when I was younger, really liked the anime movie Wolf Children. And so my persona was heavily inspired by the character Ame. And I just really liked the character, I really related to him. And to this day, I think Ren still carries aspects of this design. And so you can really see kind of those heavy influences of like warrior cats. I'll go back 2 slides. Kind of warrior cats in that character kind of showing up there. And so I think in a way, you can kind of see this with a lot of people who got to the fandom earlier on if they carried that same persona with them, and some people change personas. It's like you see those early influences of like somebody who got into the fandom through like, what are they called? Like Wings of Fire or like the Dragon books. Like they usually have like dragon personas that have like really cool names or something like that. And so you can kind of see that happen with a lot of people. And maybe if you're developing a persona, you can think about things you like and be like, okay, maybe I want to show that off with my persona. Or like, oh, I read the Warrior Cat series when I was younger and I want to have a cat persona. You know, I think that's a great idea on a starting point for persona. And so this is art I did when I was 17, and so you kind of see a design change, and so they got a different body type. And so at this point in my life, I believe I was 17, and I wanted my persona to more accurately portray my body type at this point, and I think that was due to me having a lot of body dysmorphia and stuff like that, and I was like, my self-esteem's kind of low. What if I made my persona match my body type? And would you know it, drawing my persona with my body type was actually super empowering when it came to kind of seeing my body type with some, I was like, I love my persona, and now my persona has my body type, and when I see it on myself, I don't really like it, but when I see it on my persona, I think it's really cool. And so kind of being like, all right, maybe if it looks cool on my persona, it looks cool on me. And so that was actually a really cool way to build self-esteem. And I think, I know actually a number of people who incorporated aspects of things they didn't like about themselves into their persona, and through that, they began to actually like that thing about themselves a lot more, which I think is really cool, really cool. And so this is my persona through all college, and so you can kind of see them develop more of an androgynous body type. It still feels like me though, and their designs got a bit more simple just because I noticed that artists were simplifying the markings when I commissioned folks, and this is my persona now. And so they changed a little bit. I added some eye markings, and that was about it. So my persona has remained the same since I was 13, so I've almost had my persona for a decade. And so that's why I kind of wanted to give tips on kind of how my persona has grown up with me, because I mean it kind of has. I've had this persona for my entire teenage and adult life, and how I made that happen and how I've kind of managed to connect to a character so deeply. And so let's get into it about making a persona. That's what everyone's here for. And so I've talked about them, and so let's talk about making them. So I think step one generally is species. And so that is a fun one. I think species choice generally has two schools of thought. So there's team choose your favorite animal, and then there's team choose you as what you would be if you were an animal. And so I think either way is valid, and I think you can mix the ways. And so let's talk about team favorite animal. I think this is fun because it's an animal you like, obviously, so you know the traits of the animal that you enjoy, and so maybe you can emphasize that in your persona. For example, goats are my favorite animal, and I really like their horizontal pupils, and so maybe with my goat persona, if I get art of them or I draw them, I want to emphasize their pupils by doing like really like gold rectangles, or like maybe they're outlined in a fun color or something like that. Or goats' horns are really cool, so I might give them huge horns or give them like jewelry on their horns. I think choosing a favorite animal can be really advantageous just because you know what you like. And so you can also do hybrids. Hybrids are really cool. I've seen a lot of, I'm trying to think about common hybrids. There's like the red panda toucans, those are cool, I can't remember what they're called. There's dino dogs are really awesome, I've seen those around, they're very cool. I've seen a lot of Pokesona hybrids of different Pokemon, which is really awesome. And so you can also do hybrids of fantasy species. I've seen a lot of like fluffy dragons that are like half dragon and half fox or something like that. And I think that's awesome. Pokesonas, again, quick note on those. Keep in mind Nintendo goes crazy on those copyright claims. And so if you get a fursuit, just be careful. Make sure your fursuit maker's cool with that. I don't think they're actually going to come after you, but a lot of fursuit makers are very, very cautious about making Pokemon sonas. Just something to keep in mind. As for hybrids, I don't think there's a limit. Honestly, I've seen people make personas where I can't even tell what the original animal was, and I think that's fine. But like, this is 5 different animals into one, and so I would say don't limit yourself to one species if you don't want to. You can really do whatever you like, and you can like make up your own like animal. It doesn't necessarily have to even be an animal. I've seen like aliens that are furries and stuff like that. And let's see, the other school of picking an animal that you relate to is really interesting because I think it's a bit more difficult than picking your favorite animal. This is the school, the kind of route that I took. So goats are my favorite animal, I'll give that example. But I got into the fandom through warrior cats, and I felt that my personality matched a cat a bit more than a goat. I'm lazy, I like to lay in the sun, I'm very picky about being touched, but when I want attention, I will demand it. So I was like, okay, maybe a cat's a good animal for me to pick, and so here I am picking a cat, even though goats are my favorite, and I think if you want to go this route, and I think it's a fun route to do just because it kind of can make you take a closer look at yourself, or a closer look about traits about yourself that maybe you don't like, or want to ignore, or you've never really thought about. And it can kind of make you create a reflection of yourself that's newer, or something that you haven't tried before. And so if you want to do this, my good friend said that you should try boiling down your personality to what people will describe you as if you are a cartoon character, which sounds silly, but it's actually very useful. So if you're going to give yourself like 3 adjectives, or like if you were going to describe like your favorite character from a show, try doing that with yourself, and then you'd be like, okay, what animal does that sound like? For example, like with me, it's like lazy, likes the sun, loves fish. Okay, that kind of sounds like a cat. It sounds like a lot of animals, but I'm kind of biased, so I picked a cat. But I think that's one way to do it. There's also like the per animal, like what animal am I tests, and those have gotten like really complex in the past few years. Like I took one that had like 50 different options, and so that's something you could do. I've never done that, but yeah, why not? And so notes on identity. So speaking of portraying yourself or general like physical aspects, I think only you can determine how you identify or what you want to do. And so I think choosing your persona's identity or how they present is really personal, and I don't think that anyone should ever try to dictate for you what your persona should present as or look like. For example, like I know plenty of cisgender people who have personas of the opposite gender for whatever reason, and or people have personas that are a different sexuality from them. And I think personas allow you to explore new identities in a very healthy way. I know a lot of people who are cisgender and had a persona of the opposite gender and then later ended up coming out as trans, which is really cool. I know people who are cisgender who have a persona of the opposite gender that did not end up coming out as trans, and they just like that. And I think that's really cool to be able to have that flexibility, because I mean, it's the fandom, and I think one really cool thing, especially about fursuits, is you can put on a fursuit and have a completely different body type or be someone that you've never been before. And I see no reason to limit that for someone else, or to try and say, oh, you can't do that because it's not allowed, you know what I mean? And I think it's important to honor everyone's choices. And a note on that, I will say there are outliers. If somebody's using a character to portray another group in a very harmful way, or in a way that's like stereotypical and offensive, that's not cool. Don't do that. But I'm assuming that we're talking about like normal kind people. So generally I would say identity is up to you. That's your choice. And remember that. Don't have people try and tell you what your persona is or isn't. And so, step 2, personality. So we've picked a species, all right, that's great. So who is your persona? So your persona could have no personality at all, or it could have a lot of personality. And I think some people just have like a cute character, and the cute character has like no background, no traits, it's just like a cute little guy, and that's totally valid. I think for me, and if we're talking about connecting with a character, which is, in my opinion, can be really important for a persona, and that's what was really important for me, kind of having this persona for so long. I think it's pretty wise to have some core personality traits that you might want to have on maybe your character's ref sheet, or that you want to tell artists when you're commissioning them, or you want to write about if you write stories about your persona. And so if you do have like core personality traits for your persona, what's really cool is you can also get art that's consistent or thematic. And so you could, let's say you have like a dragon that's red, he's really grumpy all the time, like that's kind of like on the nose, but whatever. And so then you can get a lot of art that's like really like kind of shows other people about like what your persona is kind of all about. And then what's really awesome is I've definitely seen people who have like this really consistent theme to their character get like recognized at cons, or people say like, oh, like I drew this art and like totally fits how that character would act or be. And so I think that can be a really good advantage is like people are like, okay, this is what this persona is, this is what they do, and then people kind of know what you're about. But you don't have to do that. I mean, my persona doesn't really have a consistent, my persona is me, so, and I'm a very complex person, oh my god. And so yeah, it doesn't have to. I have two personas. The badger is my secondary persona, and the cat is my main persona, as I showed all of you. And so the badge persona is kind of a secondary persona, and it kind of shows parts of me that I'm not crazy about. Like I can be really grumpy, and a little bit short with people, and sometimes I can, badger people a little bit, thus the badger. And so I was like, okay, like I kind of wanna have a persona that is like parts of me that I don't really like, and so I want to try and accept those parts of me by creating like a really cute character and being like, all right, it's kind of cute on them, and like they're not grumpy all the time, they can have fun, and I've kind of begun to like those parts of myself more than this character, so that's cool. And so talking about thematic art, there's them being grumpy. I realize now it kind of looks like they don't like gay people. That's not. I just looked at that now and I'm like, ooh, that looks bad. But I promise that's not it. I am a gay, and let's see, the next art is like them looking kind of like grumpy and flustered, so, it's kind of cool to have like a consistent theme, and now people draw gift art for me and they look grumpy, and I'm like, hey, that's my persona. That's so cool. Alright, so step 3, markings. And so once again, not a design panel, but I can give some ideas for markings. And so let's talk about intention versus aesthetic. So I think markings can be really important because markings are kind of the first thing people usually notice about your persona. For example, if your persona has like a lot of stripes or spots, people are going to see that. Or if your persona is very simple, for example, my persona is very simple. It's mostly white with some blue markings, and so people kind of will notice that first. And so I can't tell you like what specific colors or patterns would look pleasing, and I think ultimately that's way too subjective to really put in a panel this short. However, you can consider some things. And so colors, I'm not like an expert in color theory, but generally, let's say you want your persona to have a more grounded sort of vibe. Maybe you want to do more realistic earth tones, or if you want to get like really crazy like candy art or like rave art, maybe having a more colorful persona would be really cool because that would kind of match the art that you would be getting. Or maybe you're a raver yourself and you want to go to a lot of dances, having a persona that like glows in the dark would be really cool. And so thinking about kind of your intentions with this persona can help you develop some markings. And of course you can do whatever. For example, like you could have an earth toned persona that goes to raves, or like a really colorful persona that hikes in the mountains, Like don't limit yourself, but those are just things to consider. And so another thing that you could do is look at the markings of a species that you pick. Of course, like if you choose a fantasy species, this doesn't really apply, but for example, let me go back. Like with my badger, I didn't actually design this character, but what caught my eye about it is that it does have like traditional like badger, like you can tell that is a badger based on the markings, like you can kind of see the stripe and like the ears and everything, but there's some kind of like parts of the design that you don't really like. Badgers don't have little moles, you know what I mean? They don't have freckles on them, and they don't usually have that much color variation, but it's kind of like, okay, the jumping point was badger markings, and then it got developed. And so I think you can use the original, kind of like, not original markings, but common markings in a species to kind of start from there. And if you choose a species, for example, like my persona is a domestic cat. Domestic cats come in many colors and many varieties of patterns. You can also combine patterns, that's cool. I know some people that have like domestic cat personas that have like snow leopard markings, and so you can really get wild with it. But I mean, taking markings from the natural world can be kind of cool. Let's see. Complementary colors are a thing, so this will make your character look a bit more cohesive. Certain colors have certain color associations, and so let's just say red characters might be seen as more energetic or more aggressive. That's not, of course, that doesn't have to be the case, but thinking about like, okay, what are these color associations? Do these colors go well together? It can kind of give you an idea where to go. Additionally, you can always hire an artist to help you if you're not necessarily an artist yourself. And you can kind of give them an idea of what you'd like. A lot of people do that. There's no shame in that. I think that's absolutely fine. And you can have a character you connect to, even if somebody else draws it. There's free line art online. And so honestly, what can be really helpful is to download free line art and kind of color it in and try different patterns. I've seen a lot of people do that. I've done that when I've been changing my Persona's design, and I've like asked other people for their input about like what they think matches me. There's a lot of things you can do, and you can always employ the help of other people. Also, another thing about markings is consider money. So that might be really interesting, but if you have a character that has a lot of stripes or spots or is really complex, if you're going to be commissioning art or a fursuit of that character, keep in mind that more often than not, artists and fursuit makers do charge for complexity. So if you have a very complex character, that's totally fine. Just be prepared for people to perhaps charge more for a complexity fee. That's pretty common, and you probably will see that in a lot of artists' prices or terms of service. And so just keep that in mind. It's totally fine to do that, but you might have to pay more. Also consider that certain markings are not necessarily possible in fursuits. Fursuits have definitely developed a lot in the past few years, and you can get whatever markings you want. But remember that more pieces equals more potential for bust seams, and so if you have like a really complex design with a lot of spots, you should probably know how to sew or have somebody that knows how to sew around you, because that is a lot of potential for issues to occur. And so just keep that in mind. Another really cool thing is you can have certain markings that represent like a cultural identity or a hobby you have. For a while, a Middle Eastern, my persona had like henna on their paws and arms, which was really cute. I've seen some people have like rainbow paw prints on their persona because they're queer, which is really cool. And so that's a fun thing to do. Last year, my guest panelist mentioned that he took a trait that he didn't like about himself. I think he mentioned that he has like dark circles around his eyes, and he put that in his Fursona's design. So his Fursona has like kind of like dark like goggle markings around their eyes. So we're gonna start with my lovely friend Felix. And this is Felix's Fursona up here, and yeah, Felix, take it away.
Thank you so much. So I've had this Fursona, and he has not really changed in design for about 7 years. Some of the things that I kept in mind while making him was what he represents about me. I have multiple Fursonas, and they all share a couple key traits that helps me connect with them. So one thing you might notice about him, he's kind of small up there, but he has kind of dark rings around his eyes. He's got that kind of raccoon mask thing going on. And I also have those. And it made me really embarrassed for a long time until I started incorporating it into my Fursona designs. And now it feels like something that I like about myself. I like my Fursona, I love how he looks, and it's helped me a lot with that.
And he put that on there, and then I know somebody else who took something about themselves that they really liked, their freckles, and put that on their Fursona. And so you can really take things from animals or yourself and incorporate that. And so I think this is a place where you can really take a lot of time to think about what you want your persona to look like. And the really great thing is that you can always change your persona later. Like your persona is not permanent, like it doesn't have to be, it can be. But no one's like gonna force you to keep it the same, which is awesome. And so, let's see. Let's go to the next thing. Developing a design over time. Speaking of that, so as you commission art of your persona or draw them more, you may notice that some people or you draw their markings in a specific way or take shortcuts in drawing the design. And so what's interesting about this, and as somebody who's commissioned a lot of art of my persona, What's really cool is that you can either take aspects of this and incorporate them into new iterations of your persona's design. For example, like Ren had kind of these like watercolor markings that were kind of brushed on, and that was partially because I wasn't a very good artist and I didn't really know how to use like digital art stuff. And I noticed that when I commissioned art of them, artists would almost always simplify those markings into like solid colors instead of kind of that brushed on watercolor look. And so in later iterations of Ren's design, I just made them like simple. Like I made like their tummy marking a raindrop instead of like this like weird brushed trail, and that was a lot nicer. And I actually like it more now. And so you can do that. You can look at what people do with your persona and say, hey, I like that. I want to do this like with my next version of my persona. Or you can say, hey, I don't like that. And on your ref sheet, you can say, you know, their ears are like only one ear flops, not both ears, or like not both ears are pointy or something like that. So you can point out things that people usually get wrong with your persona, and then note that specifically on your ref sheet. And so I think having other people draw your persona can be really useful for seeing how other people interpret it. And so if you have, and of course recognizing not everybody has the money or the resources to commission art of their persona, that's totally fine, but if you do, I think getting like a few drawings can be really cool because you can see how your persona is kind of coming across. And it's a good like almost litmus test for like, is this how I want my persona to be? Is it giving off the vibe that I want? And I think that can be really useful. Okay, so step 4, connecting. This is a kind of a very subjective part of the panel. I'm so sorry that it's like not more exact, but I'm gonna try my best to kind of describe how I connected with my character. So how did I originally connect to Ren? So this is a bit more personal, but I integrated parts of me into my character, and so slowly over time, Ren changed as I changed, which was super cool. Like when I began like medically transitioning, Ren's body type changed. I started drawing facial hair on them, and I was like, okay, like my persona's kind of following my physical path, which made me kind of connect to them more. I think also for me, what I really wanted in a persona was a persona that looked like me, so I gave them my haircut, I gave them my glasses, I gave them like a color that my hair was dyed at the time originally. And I think for me, like seeing that on a character, I was like, okay, this character basically looks like me, so it's me. And so that really helped me connect. Some people can connect with their persona through art or through writing and writing about their persona, kind of doing things that they do in their like daily lives, or getting art of their persona, like doing their job. Like I know someone in the fandom who has a Tasmanian devil persona, and they get art of that persona like working in a steel mill, which is where they work, and that's really cool. And so I think, you know, kind of trying to put yourself kind of, or parts of yourself into your persona, or like trying to really think about who you are when you create and kind of use your persona can be really helpful to connecting. And sometimes you don't connect with a character, or you lose connection, and that's okay because people change. And so not everyone is gonna have the same persona for a decade. That's totally okay. And sometimes you can change your persona with you, and that's great. But sometimes you need a fully like brand new character, and that's also all right. And so don't be afraid to change your persona. If you change your persona multiple times, that's not a failure. It doesn't mean that you've like chosen the wrong character or people are gonna judge you. I mean, the fact of the matter is like nobody stays the same, and sometimes like, you know, for me, like I've had the same cat persona for 10 years, but maybe in 5 years I'll say, man, I actually really don't like cats anymore, and I wanna be like a really cool like wolf with like 5 moon markings down my back or something, and I could do that. And you have to really think about like what makes you you. And so like, what do you represent? Who are you? And what traits do you think are core to you? Or what traits do you want to have? And so I think those can be really helpful to connecting to a character. And for me, Ren was able to evolve with me, and I'm really happy about that because I really loved that character, and I don't think I'll get a new persona anytime soon. And also, like me, if you have a main persona that you really love and you don't want to change your character, you can always make a secondary persona, or you can make another persona. So you don't always have to like fully replace them either. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to add something on, you can, or you can just create a new character. And that's fine. You can just have two personas and like alternate what you get art of, or alternate like, attention almost, like two kids or something. I don't know. I don't have kids. I wouldn't know. And so I'm gonna do a little experiment. So I need a victim. And if somebody wants to volunteer, I saw your hand like shoot up in the back, like really fast. Okay. Hi. How are you? So yeah, you can come up. Since, I'm assuming everyone will want to hear you. What's your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, all right. Do you have a persona?
I am working on my first one.
All right, so talk to me about it. What are you working on?
I'm working on a brown and white cat named Freckles.
Okay, love that.
My mom always called me Freckle Face. I've always loved my freckles, although they are fading.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have the white muzzle with the brown spots across it to represent those freckles that I have always been fond of.
I think that's really awesome to really bring kind of part of your lore into that, and that's really cool. So, what do you think you'll incorporate anything from this panel into your persona design?
Yes, I'm gonna think more about the personality because previously it was more a costume for me to wear than it was a character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you for coming up. And so I think you give like a really good example of having like a really solid, like, okay, I'm taking like this part of myself or, this kind of part of like aspect of me. And also you can like totally stay up here, you can go back, whatever, do whatever you're comfortable with. As I realize I'm like keeping you up here.
Do I leave or
you can stay up here if you want. And putting that into like the design of your persona. And I think also like, yeah, developing personality is definitely something to think about. And so thank you for volunteering to be a victim. And so I think that's a really good example of how people can develop personas differently, because I kind of started from like a character. Obviously they did not. They started from like their own personal life. And so I think multiple ways to do this. Any route is a good route. And I'm just giving ideas here. And so it is Q&A time. And so if you have a question, raise your hand. If you don't, that's also okay. Hold on, yes.
So I have a little bit of an odd, situation.
All right.
It wasn't me, but my friend bought a Premade last night, and she's like, I don't know what I just did. I have no plans for this. And so she's like standing there with this partial, and she's like, I love them so much, and I want them because I fell in love with them.
Yeah.
But I have no idea how to develop a personality for them.
Totally.
And so it's like, how do you start with, you already have a character, but you don't have like any personality or even a name for them yet?
Absolutely. So I actually feel really good about this question because I have a fursuit, and my fursuit is not any of my personas or even my character. I actually bought it from somebody who was selling their persona. It's not even my persona, it's somebody else's. And so when I got this character, it's like, I wish I had a photo that I could put up, but it's like a grumpy dog, and I'm a cat. And so I had the same thing where I was like, oh man, I just bought this fursuit that I love the design of, but I have no idea how I'm gonna like connect to this. And for some people, like, connection's like really important. Some people it's not. For me, it was, and it kind of sounds like it is for your friend. I think one thing, especially for a fursuit, since I'm assuming, is it a pre-made design or a fursuit?
It's a pre-made fursuit, and like they didn't come with a full design. It was just like the head, and
cool.
it's a bat, so it's got wings and like the paws.
Oh,
and
cute.
She's adorable.
Okay.
You may see her run around with me later.
All right, awesome. Okay. Maybe show me photos after the panel. I'm really
I
curious.
think I have a picture.
Please do. Okay. So I think for that, looking at the fursuit itself and saying like, what's the expression on the character? Okay. Are they like happy looking? Are they kind of like sleepy looking? And like developing a personality off of that, and then incorporating parts of you into that. For example, like my grumpy dog fursuit. I was like, okay, what are parts of me that are kind of dog-like? And I was like, okay, I'm like pretty friendly most of the time, and I really like to like kind of like jump around when I'm really excited. So I was like, okay, like I can be kind of grumpy, but if somebody like gives me like a prop or something, I can act really excited. Or if somebody like comes up to hug me and is really excited, maybe like act grumpy at first, and then I'll hug them really excitedly. And so like thinking about, okay, so like expression, all right, it kind of seems sleepy, all right, and then taking parts of yourself and then putting that into the character can be really good for kind of like performance stuff and like the personality. And as for design, I think it's advantageous that you only have like a head and paws and like a little bit to work with, because that means for the body you can like incorporate a lot more, and so there's a lot of flexibility there. But that's kind of like a good jumping off point, I think. Did that answer your question?
Yes, no, it was great. I was
Cool,
like,
awesome,
"Ah,
perfect.
sorry."
Okay, other questions? Mm-hmm. We're good?
Oh,
Oh, yes. I see you in the back.
when you retire a Fursona, do you ever go through almost like a grieving process, or maybe like a send-off process? Do you have some sort of like ritual for that?
I think, like, me personally or just in general?
I guess you personally.
That's a really good question. I think so I haven't really retired a persona. I've retired some characters that were really important to me. I think if I retired Ren, I would most definitely have like a little funeral or whatever, just because they've been with me for 10 years, and I think it would, yeah, I would say I would have like kind of like maybe like a ritual of like, I really like burning things on fire in like a safe way. I'm sorry, that's so scary. But like in a safe way, like kind of, it's like kind of purifying. Maybe I do like a drawing of them and then like burn it in a fire, and then I would like, I would think I would keep all of the stuff, like art I have of them. But I think mourning a persona can actually be really healthy if you're gonna retire them, just because it's like, okay, I'm kind of saying goodbye to this part of myself. For example, like me saying goodbye to Ren would be saying goodbye to like 13-year-old me, and like all these years of like me developing as a teenager and a young adult. And so I think absolutely, I've definitely seen some people have like little like okay, like bye-bye, like they're like a picture of their new persona hugging their old persona, or like waving goodbye to their old persona. I think that's really cute. And I think, for some people it's like just a little like furry character and they don't do that, but I'm like a really sentimental person, so I might. And I think I would definitely do that, and I have kind of done similar things for the characters that aren't my persona, but are like pretty close, and so that's a really great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Do you have any tips for handling characters or personas with like multiple forms? Because I have like a Stoke character I'm making, and he's going to have like both the summer and winter forms, kind of exaggerate the differences that they have between the seasons. So I was wondering if you had any tips for that.
Tips on like designing, or like how to connect, or
tips on like basically like how to go about it, designing. Like, just any general tips that you have?
Yeah, totally. So generally what I have seen people do, and my persona for a while did have a summer and winter coat, is generally what happens for the summer coat is usually it's a warmer color, or it's a more like saturated color palette, and so it's more vibrant most of the time. You said Stoat?
Yes.
I don't really know. Awesome. I don't really know. I think Stoats have a summer and winter coat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you could do like a complete change where you could be like, okay, since I think usually they're white in the winter and then like brown in the summer. Yeah, and so you could be like, okay, like a full change, a full color code change, like in the natural world. Or it could be like, okay, they have like some brown, some white, and then it's more saturated in the summer, and then like much lighter with cool tones in the winter. I think it really depends on what you want. It might be useful to have like a consistent design that just changes colors, because if you have like a full change, it could look like a different character. But also it doesn't really, it's like your decision. So I think it's really about like, do you want to have like a kind of like a collection of like art of the same character, or are you okay having like different, kind of almost like different looking characters, even though they're the same character. And so it's like really about your own personal preference, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion
Yes.
to the previous question. I would see if you know an artist, or if you are an artist, get line art that you can copy over, and then literally just color palette change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that can help, and then even from then, you can make like your winter coat maybe has like branches instead of leaves or greens. So that's what I suggest doing, is getting double line art or like double art, and then just swapping color palette.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really great suggestion. In the back.
Oh, I just wanted to ask for advice about something. So I really like what you mentioned of like updating your character's design, just like kind of making little changes. That's something I kind of struggle with because when I'm making a character, I'll commission a rough sheet for them,
Mm-hmm.
and then like a week later, I'm like, oh, I actually don't like this,
Mm-hmm.
and like, oh, I want to change this certain part.
Yeah.
And if I'm not really, like, if I don't have access, if I'm not like really into, I'm not really a great artist personally, so it's kind of hard for me because obviously I can't like really change it at that point. But I just have this idea that of like a part that I want to change. Do you have any advice for that generally, or just like kind of like rough sheets in general, like how to go about that?
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into that trap before. Like, I really like this character. I'm gonna get a rep of them. Oh no, I don't like this character, and now I have this rep on my hands that I'm not gonna use. And so what I generally do is I kind of have like a 3-month rule, where I'm like, I'm gonna try and use this character for 3 months, and if I use them for 3 months, I absolutely will get a rep sheet. And if I don't, I haven't like used my money to get a rep sheet of them, and so that's been helpful. Also, and free line art is your friend, or getting line art from an artist is your friend, and so you can always just color in line art. And that's pretty simple to do. I've seen a lot of people do it with like MS Paint or something, and that can be useful because then you have it invest in like a whole rep sheet, and you can still have a representation of your character to like commission art or to show off. And then if you've been using them for a while, then if it's been like a while, then you could commission a rep sheet, and that's like no financial loss to you. And then I see, do you have something in response to that, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, one really great online resource is doll makers like the ones on Pickroot.
Okay.
Most of them will be human-centric, but you can find furry doll makers, and those are great for just hashing out an idea without, if you don't have art skills yourself, without having to pay an artist to hash out an idea and then realizing you don't like it.
Awesome, okay. And then I saw 2 questions. I'll do you and then you, and I think we'll have to end the panel there. Is that okay?
Oh, I was gonna say, I got all the complicated stuff for the most part fleshed out. Ironically, the part that I can't get is the name of the character. I have like a stand-in for, the name is Chester. It just has to be not super pompous because you're a chemist and I hate it when people are super like pompous and arrogant about that stuff. But that part is good.
Man, so if anyone, I might take crowd suggestions on this one because I am the worst person for names. Like really, like I have been trying to change my legal name for like years now, and I haven't been able to pick anyone, so I'm not the right person for that. But like maybe like 2 suggestions from these 2 people, and then I'll take your question. So go ahead.
Okay, you can go first.
Okay. So my character, I specifically, she's a bobcat, and I wanted to focus on Arizona, so I picked plants in Arizona, and I wanted to be cacti. So I specifically was looking around at like prickly pear cacti and stuff like that, and so their scientific name, which might work pretty well for being a chemist, looking at scientific names like the Latin bases. And so scientific name for prickly pear is Apocia, but there's the golden prickly pear, which in Latin is Aurea. And so I switched letters around and everything, and it just took the word golden basically from it, and that's basically her name. So looking at like scientific names and stuff might be helpful in that respect too, and it also kind of goes back to being a chemist.
Yeah, there's some like funky ones that are like not super like. I want to be wrong.
Yeah, it takes a bit of tweaking sometimes to find something that sounds good. The only problem is potentially people don't know how to pronounce your name or spell your name correctly. That's the only issue, but you can have that issue regardless. So.
Okay, thank you.
Another way that like I was looking names for my friend's Fursona was we were looking at things that like reminded her, like if you have a design, like look at it and like what first things come to mind when you see your design. And you could always like look up, like we went with like goddesses and gods, because hers has like skulls on it. So I was like, okay, the god of death, the god of the night. And so I was like looking up different things that reminded me of that. And then I looked up like Halloween in other languages. That's actually how we named my one cat, was I wanted to name him Flower. And so I looked up flower in other languages, and so we ended up naming him Doke, which is flower in, I think, Japanese. And so you could always go with that and look up like different like if you're wanting to be a chemist, you could always look up chemistry in other languages and like do that kind of thing. And that seems to open up the doors for a name, but like she said, it can lead to possibly having a hard time spelling it, or like people being like, what is your name? And so it always, and then another way is if you have like a name that's like really like special to you and like your family, you could always go with that. Like a name in my family that's really special is Rose, and so it's my middle name and my grandmother's middle name, and so it's like one that's been passed down, and then just go with that, and like then it's a little easier and it's an actual like human name, but it just, and then like famous chemists that you maybe look up to, you could take their last name or their first name and use that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Really awesome suggestions, thank you, and I will remember that for myself. Yes, your question.
Alright, so I was kind of nervous to ask this because it might be like a semi-sensitive topic, but like my first persona was based off of like a bear, mainly because like all my life I've been like weight discriminated, and even now I've been weight discriminated against, right? So like I originally made it a bear just to try to take away some of that power from being known as the fat sister, but like in the early days of that persona, it was like with really semi like toxic traits about it. So now I'm just kind of like in a weird place with that persona where I still like it, but at the same time I don't like the toxicity that came with that persona from when I first made it.
That totally makes sense, and I definitely like know people who either, and not that specific case, but like have personas that are associated with like their abusers or associated with like trauma they have, and they like kind of want to move past it. And so what you could do, and I appreciate you sharing that, by the way, thank you for feeling safe enough to share that. What you could do is either one, like make a new character and then take what you like about your current character and then kind of move it forward, and then like leave what kind of bothers you or kind of reminds you of all of that behind. Or you could kind of really like own it and be like, okay, like this character was created back like when I kind of had these ideas about myself or was trying to cope in this way and it didn't really work, but I'm going to like kind of transform this character, and you could like change aspects of that character to kind of make it a new character but still have like the older design. I think because it is so personal, it's really up to you. But I think it's totally possible to like take what you like and then move it to a new character and not kind of like feel trapped by needing to like hold on to that past, if that makes sense. Totally, I hope that helps. Yeah, all right, well, I'll let you all go early because we have 7 minutes left. And so if you have questions, you can come up to me after the panel, and I really appreciate all of you coming. Thank you again, and I'm just love to Discord serve. Thank you. Have a great time, everyone. All right.
Oh, yeah, definitely.